92-year-old Andrew Nixon is here to give us some of the early history of St. George.
I came to St. George in November, or rather to Jerilderie, which is 25 miles from St. George, in November 1883.
Where did you come from, Mr. Nixon?
From Jerilderie in New South Wales.
Wasn't that one of the places that Ned Kelly visited?
Yes, it's the place where he come and robbed the bank. He robbed the bank in Jerilderie.
Were you around at that time?
I had a blacksmith shop in Jerilderie at the time. I shot several of the horses that he took away with him. Notably the grey horse that they didn't get for 18 months afterwards, although they were on his tracks immediately after he left the town.
Were you there the day of the actual robbery?
Yes, in the street.
Well, tell us something of the robbery and of the boys themselves.
I see. Well, on the night before the bank robbery took place, I was going out on a shooting excursion, and I met 4 men on the road. They were coming down to St. George. I went shooting during that day, came back again, went to work on Monday morning, and about 6 o'clock, a little bit after 6 o'clock, we used to work at 10 hours in those days, a man come and brought a brown mare and a horse to the shop to be shod. He didn't say who he was, but he left him to be shod and went to get some food. When he came back, he brought a loaf of bread and some beef steak, put it on the bench, and when he took the horses, he left the bread and beef there. Didn't take it, which we thought was rather strange. Now, at that particular time, there was an epidemic of bushranging in New South Wales. There was the Wonder Badgery bushrangers. There was the Moonlight bushrangers, and there was the Ned Kelly bushrangers. There were 3 lots out at the time, and New South Wales government had put patrols of police through the country to look after the welfare of the people and to go after the bushrangers. So that it was nothing strange for us to see strange police in the town. About 10 o'clock on Monday morning, the morning I speak of, 2 policemen walked down the street. One was Harry Richards, the constable. The sergeant's name was Divine. Harry Richards and another constable, evidently by appearance a sergeant, walked down the street. We looked at them passing by, but took no notice because we were accustomed to see a number of strange police come to the town at different times without any notice. About 5 minutes after that, the boy that was striking in this forge for me said, "Look at this." And we looked out of the end window of the shop, and the sergeant, the man that appeared to be the sergeant in company with Harry Richards, was knocking the insulators off the post office window sill. It was a rented place, and the insulators leading into the sill, leading the wires into the office was fixed on the windowsill, and he was knocking the insulators off with the butt of his revolver. We dropped at once that there was something wrong. He went from there into a bookmaker's shop. When he come out again, the bookmaker's shop, he had an axe, and an old publican that was there, Charlie Law was his name, an old German. He gave him the axe and set him to chop down the telegraph pole in the front of the post office. He walked from there straight across the street, straight across a block. There was a triangular piece of ground between the 2 streets, and he walked across the triangular piece of ground and into the bank door. This we've seen. There's the editor of the paper, to go back on my story a little while, the editor of the paper was on the watch and knew all about it. The way he come to know all about it was as follows. On Sunday morning, after I met those men on Saturday night when I was going shooting, on Sunday morning, Mass was held in the courthouse which was about 300 yards from the police barracks and across a public road. When the mass was to be held, Ned Kelly and Mrs. Devine went across the road and got the courthouse ready for mass, and then returned to the police barracks. When mass was over, the editor of the paper, whose name I disremember, but I think it was Good, or something like that. The editor of the paper, he was curious and went across to the police barracks to investigate why Mrs. Devine and Sergeant Devine was not at mass. He knocked at the door, knocked at the window, and walked round the house. He was very curious. He knew there was something strange, but couldn't make out it was. But he kept wandering round the place until at last there was a rap on the window, and his attention was called to it. And Mrs. Devine said to him, "You're wanted." And then Kelly spoke to him. He said, "I'm Kelly, and I'm the bushranger. I'm here, and I've got Sergeant Devine locked up. Now, if you say one word before 10 o'clock, or before you're given permission tomorrow morning at 10 on Monday morning, I'll shoot you. You've got a testament in your hand, yes, swear that you'll hold your tongue until after 10 o'clock tomorrow, or till you're given permission." And the editor of the paper pledged himself to hold his tongue, so that he was perfectly well aware of the fact that the Kellys was in the town on Sunday night, and nobody else but him. Now, at that particular time, it was 60 miles to Deniliquin, and they used to bring the beer in hogsheads in a large 6-horse van. And there was a row of casks standing in front of the bank. When the sergeant of police, looked like really Ned Kelly, walked into the bank, the editor was watching, and he ran across to the bank. The man they called Larkin, who kept a store next to the bank, was the first one he met. Next to him was J.D. Rankin, the old magistrate, an old Scotchman, and he was at late breakfast, getting up a late breakfast. The editor of the paper took Harkins into his confidence. Harkins took at once to Rankin, only a few steps away, and Rankin said, "We'll stop this," and jumped up and made for the bank. Yeah. Rankin said, "We'll stop this," and went into the bank. When he went into the bank, he met a revolver in each of Kelly's hands and a revolver in Burns' hands at the back of the counter. He had entered from the back way. Now, I must tell you that the bank was the coffee room of an hotel, which had been set up for the bank and divided Harkins' store from the Royal Mail Hotel. The bank was between the two, but was a portion of the hotel. When Byrne come in the back way, Living, who stuttered rather badly, said, "Old man, you've made a mistake. You want to go back. You were making for the pub." He said, "No, I'm making for here," and pulled out a revolver and held up Living, who was the teller in the bank. Young Mackey, who was the clerk, made a rush for a revolver, and Byrne pulled him up short. Took the revolver from him. Kelly was in front of the bank counter. Byrne, Living, and Mackey was behind it under cover of Byrne's revolvers. Now, Dan Kelly was in the bar parlour of the public house adjoining the bank. And Hart, he was with Dan Kelly in the car. Now, Hart was a little undersized man, a jockey you'd call him, about 8 stone and a half. But a very timid sort of a fellow. If a revolver was shaking, he'd shoot you out of fear. Dan Kelly was more composed. Ned Kelly was evidently the headpiece of the part of the gang, and Byrne was the man that he relied in. Now, when Rankin entered the bank and met the revolvers, he turned short, and there was a heavy foot scraper at the door. He stumbled over that, and Kelly seized him. But Harkin had slipped back, but Kelly had caught sight of Harkin, And he took Rankin and followed to where Parkin would be and found him in a bedroom and brought him back. Took him and put him in the custody of Burden and Hart and old J.D. Rankin along with them. They then robbed the bank and burned up all records in the backyard before there was much commotion in the town. But the man that knew about it, the editor of the paper, he had bolted, and he never stopped running till he got to Curra Farm, Wilson. That was 4 miles away. That was the first place he pulled up at. When Hart and Dan Kelly held the bar, everybody that come into the hotel was taken into the bar parlour and held prisoners. They had as much drink as they liked. They paid for it if they liked, and if they didn't, the bushrangers paid for the drinks. And on that particular occasion, I want to tell you that the 4 bushrangers were the most popular men in St. George, in Jerilderie. There was as much drink as you wanted. Ned Kelly was a man with a fairly good gift of the tongue, and he had a story that appealed to everybody. His justification, what he said was his justification for taking to the bush, was the treatment that his mother had received at the hands of the police, and also his sister, who had been dishonoured by a policeman, and the mother put in the lockup when she took steps about it. So he said that he'd taken to the road on that account. As a matter of fact, they were a band of horse stealers from their infancy.
Mr. Nixon, it is said that you, as blacksmith in Jerilderie at that time, were to have made the armour that Ned Kelly wore. Is that correct?
No, I didn't make the armour. I've been credited with having made the armour for Ned Kelly's war. In fact, to tell the truth, they have endeavoured on more than one occasion to blackmail me on the subject of making the armour for Kelly. No, a man, Ryan, who's no doubt dead now, that lived in the hills where Kelly was the man that made the armour. There was a number of Kelly's relations in the Jerilderie district, and strange to say, there wasn't an individual, well, as a man in business, I didn't know it, and I don't think many more knew it either. I didn't know that there was relations of Kelly's in Jerilderie, but there was relations of Ned Kelly's in Jerilderie, one of them sitting on the bench. The names were Quinn. There's no secret about it.
A man called Dan Kelly was supposed to have been seen several years ago around the southeastern portion of Queensland and down in New South Wales too. Would he be Dan Kelly?
No. That man is Wild Right. If he heard his name mentioned, it might bring his memory back. I think he's under an obsession that he really is Dan Kelly. But I know the man from having read all about him, and I'm quite clear in my own mind that if I met him, that I would meet Wild Right, a man that I have met scores of times when he was there. They gave him 15 years to keep him from joining the gang. And when the judge asked him if there was anything, he had to say why he should not be sentenced by the court. He told the judge to go ahead, it was better now than later.
And exactly how did the Jerilderie affair end? Did you see the Kellys leave town?
Oh, yes. Byrne and Dan Kelly. Byrne and Dan Kelly left with the plunder. Ned Kelly and Hart remained behind. Hart in the afternoon robbed a clergyman of a watch, and in my presence, Ned Kelly pulled him to order, took the watch from him, returned it to Mr. Gribble, the minister who was after in Queensland here in Mission Camp, and took a watch out of his pocket and handed it to Hart and said, "Here, there's something worth wearing," and then remarked, "That's poor old Kennedy's watch. That was Sergeant Kennedy that he had shot in the Ranges." He gave Hart Kennedy's watch in my presence in Jerilderie.
Were the Kellys young men or middle-aged men?
I would say that Ned Kelly would be 30 in the 30s, and Burden would be in the 30s. And Dan Kelly was much younger, and Hart was younger than Dan.
Did you see the gang after that at all, or did you have anything to do with the Glenrowan affair?
Never seen them again.
You have been listening to Mr. Andrew Nixon, 92-year-old resident of the Anchorage, St. George, southwestern Queensland, telling you of the Kelly gang as he knew them at Jerilderie.